He used to drive a silver Lexus, walk into offices wearing Italian suits, and sign checks that made other men envious. Today, he sits barefoot by a roadside, clutching a faded Bible and staring into the dust, his stomach growling. 3 years ago, he buried his daughter because he couldn't afford her hospital bills. 2 months later, his wife walked out, leaving him with nothing but debt and grief. And now, as he coughs blood into his hands, dying from liver failure, he whispers, "Lord, is this how my story ends?" But before everything fell apart, before the hospital rooms, the betrayals, and the endless nights of hunger, he was just a man in love. If you're new here, take a second to subscribe, because what you're about to hear isn't fiction. It's a real story of a man who lost everything. Now let's go back to where it all began. He had nothing but dreams when he met her. Her name was Grace. Gentle smile, eyes that looked like hope itself. Michael was a businessman on the rise back then, running a small but growing contracting firm. They met at a church youth conference. She was the choir leader, and he, one of the donors helping fund the event. The first time he heard her sing, he swore the heavens opened a little. He didn't have much, but he was determined to marry her. So when her family asked for a bride price he couldn't afford, he did something foolish. He borrowed money, not from a bank, but from a friend named Raymond, a man who had helped him in business once. "Don't worry, Mike," Raymond said, slapping his back. "Pay me back when the next contract lands." That was the beginning of everything. The wedding was simple but beautiful. Guests danced, laughter filled the air, and Michael, standing beside Grace in his rented tuxedo, felt like the luckiest man alive. "We'll build an empire," he whispered to her that night. She smiled, pressing her head to his chest. "As long as we have each other." For the first year, things went well. He landed a big contract, renovating an office complex. They moved into a small apartment in the city. Grace got pregnant. Life felt blessed. But blessings sometimes come before storms. It started with a delayed payment from a client, then another, then the big contract, the one he was depending on, collapsed. The investor pulled out, leaving Michael neck-deep in unpaid loans. Grace was 8 months pregnant when he received a call from Raymond. "Mike, it's been almost a year. You said you'd pay back in 6 months." "Ray, please, just a little more time," Michael begged. Silence. Then Raymond's voice, cold as stone. "Don't let me come looking for you." Grace gave birth to their first daughter a month later. Her name was Faith, but joy turned into fear when doctors said she had cerebral palsy. Michael remembered standing there, staring at the ceiling, while Grace cried softly beside the hospital bed. "It's not your fault," he told her. "We'll get through this." But his voice cracked because he didn't believe it himself. Bills piled up. Clients vanished. Calls stopped. The once respected businessman became that man who used to drive a Lexus. They prayed. They fasted. Michael stopped eating some nights so his wife and child could. He began doing menial jobs, cleaning, fixing broken fences, carrying cement. Still, it wasn't enough. One evening, while returning home from a cleaning job, he found himself sitting alone by a bus stop, exhausted and covered in dust. That's when he met him, the preacher. "Brother," the man said, handing him a bottle of water. "You look tired." Michael gave a faint smile. "I've been tired for a long time." The man nodded knowingly. "The Book of Job. Have you ever read it?" Michael scoffed. "You mean the man who lost everything?" "Yeah, I've lived it." The preacher smiled gently. "Then maybe it's time you see how it ends." That conversation changed something inside him. He didn't cry that night, for the first time in months. He went home, opened the dusty Bible on his table, and began reading. Page after page, Job's story mirrored his own, the losses, the confusion, the silence of God. Yet Job didn't curse him. From that day, Michael prayed differently. Not asking for money, not for success, just strength. But faith doesn't erase pain. It only gives it meaning. 3 years passed. He still hadn't recovered. And Grace, she was slipping away. If you've made it this far, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because what happens next will leave you speechless. One night, after another argument about money and hospital bills, she broke down. "I can't do this anymore, Michael. I can't watch us die like this." He stood there, trembling. "Grace, please, I'm trying." Tears streamed down her face. "Trying isn't enough. I buried my son last year, Michael. I can't lose faith, too." That was the night she packed her bags and left. The day Grace left, Michael stood at the doorway, watching her drag the worn-out suitcase down the dusty road. Their daughter, Faith, was asleep inside, her tiny hands clutching a doll with one missing arm. "Grace," he called weakly. She stopped, turned halfway, tears streaming down her face. "I can't do this anymore, Michael," she said, voice breaking. "Every day feels like a funeral." "I'm trying." "I know," she interrupted, wiping her face. "But love doesn't fill stomachs. Faith needs medicine. We need hope, Michael. And I'm all out of it." He didn't stop her. He didn't even move. He just watched her go, the woman he once borrowed money to marry, disappearing into the distance like a dream that couldn't survive daylight. That night, the silence was unbearable. He sat in the dark, staring at the flickering candlelight. The walls felt like they were closing in. The bills, the letters, the threats from creditors, all of it lay scattered on the table like reminders of how far he had fallen. He whispered to the empty room, "God, if you can hear me, please, don't let this be my story." But heaven stayed silent. Days blurred into weeks. Michael and Faith moved into his grandmother's small house in the village, an old building with cracked walls and a leaking roof. His grandmother welcomed him with open arms, though her eyes carried the weight of worry. "You've lost too much already, my son," she said one night as she massaged his shoulders. "Don't lose yourself too." But he was losing himself, slowly. Every morning, he carried a basket of fruits and vegetables to the roadside, trying to sell enough to feed them. Some days, he sold everything. Most days, nothing. And when there was no food, he prayed, "Lord, you said you provide for the birds in the air. Don't forget us too." And somehow, something always happened. Once a stranger stopped by his stall, bought everything and whispered, "God said to bless you." Another day, he found a bag of rice at the door. No note, no clue who left it. Each time he'd hold Faith in his arms and say, "See, baby? God still sees us." But Faith's health was worsening. Her small body grew thinner, her speech slurred. She cried more often now. Soft, helpless cries that tore at his soul. One night, she coughed blood. Michael panicked. He ran to the clinic carrying her in his arms. The nurse looked up, recognized him, and frowned. "You again?" "We can't keep treating her for free, Mr. Michael." "Please," he begged. "She's all I have. Just help her breathe." The nurse sighed and took Faith inside. He waited outside for hours, pacing, praying, whispering every verse of Job he remembered. "Though he slayed me, yet will I trust him." When the doctor finally emerged, his face told the story before his mouth did. "She needs constant care. Medication, nutrition, therapy. Without it," he hesitated, "her body won't hold out much longer." Michael swallowed hard. "How much?" The doctor wrote a figure on paper and slid it forward. It might as well have been $1 million. He looked down, laughed bitterly. "I can't even feed her, doctor. You think I can afford this?" The doctor looked away, uncomfortable. "I'm sorry." He carried Faith home that night under the cold moonlight. She was barely awake, her breathing shallow, her small hand limp in his. "Mama," he whispered when they reached home, "what kind of father can't save his child?" His grandmother's eyes filled with tears. "You're doing all you can. The rest is God's to do." But Michael didn't believe it anymore. 2 days later, Faith's condition worsened. She couldn't eat. Her skin burned with fever. He prayed, begged, screamed, but there was no miracle this time. Just before dawn, she looked at him with half-closed eyes, and whispered, "Daddy, don't cry. Jesus loves me." And then she stopped breathing. Michael froze. He held her close, shaking her gently. "Faith, baby, wake up, please." When she didn't move, he screamed, the sound echoing through the silent morning like a blade through the soul. His grandmother came running, her frail body trembling as she fell beside him. "No, no, not the child." They buried Faith the next day behind the house. The coffin was small, white and covered with wildflowers his grandmother picked herself. Michael dug the grave with his bare hands. Each scoop of dirt felt like another piece of his heart breaking. When it was done, he fell to his knees, staring at the fresh mound of earth. "God," he whispered, voice cracking, "I gave you everything. My business, my wife, my pride, my daughter. What else do you want?" The wind blew softly, but heaven was silent. That night, he sat by her grave long after everyone else had gone inside. He didn't eat, didn't move, didn't pray. He just stared at the stars, empty. His grandmother came out hours later, her shawl wrapped tight. "Come inside, my son. You'll get sick." He didn't respond. She sighed, whispering, "Job lost everything too, but God restored him." He looked at her with hollow eyes. "Then maybe I'm not Job. Maybe I'm just cursed." Days passed, but Michael didn't recover. He stopped working, stopped talking. He started drinking, anything to numb the pain. His grandmother watched helplessly as the bottles piled up. "You'll destroy yourself," she warned. "I already am," he said. Weeks turned into months. His once strong frame grew thin. His eyes yellowed. He coughed blood into his hands. Still, he kept drinking. A week later, he'd collapse on the street, unconscious. And when he woke up 3 days later, he was examined by the village doctor, and the verdict was brutal. "Your liver's failing," he said. "You need treatment immediately." Michael laughed, a hollow, bitter sound. "Treatment? With what money?" The doctor sighed. "Then pray, son. You'll need a miracle." That night, lying beside Faith's grave, he whispered, "Lord, if this is how it ends, at least let me see you before I go." He didn't know it yet. If the prayer would open heaven's door. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Because in the next episode, the same man who buried his daughter and was given weeks to live wasn't prepared for what was about to happen next.